Why was she the only one who noticed the silence? Sarah Martinez had learned that in war zones, silence rarely meant peace. It was the kind of silence that pressed on your chest, like the pause before an explosion. She shifted in her seat, the late morning heat clinging to her skin as the convoy crawled through the empty streets of Fallujah. Her hand rested on a stack of patient records, names of people she hadn't met yet but was already responsible for saving. She was a nurse, not a soldier, 28 years old, from Phoenix, a desert girl who traded comfort for chaos, laughter for the sound of distant gunfire. She volunteered for the International Medical Relief Organization 2 years earlier, believing that even in a war, compassion still mattered. But lately, compassion felt like a luxury, something fragile and almost naive in the face of all this. Her translator, Ahmed, rode beside her. A father of three with a soft voice and an old soul, he pointed out landmarks as they passed, mosques scarred by shrapnel, homes turned to rubble, walls painted with slogans that shifted meaning depending on who held power that week. "Used to be a bakery," he said, nodding toward a collapsed building. "Best bread in Fallujah." Sarah smiled faintly. "You always say that." "I do," he replied. "Because it's true, you should have tasted it before the war." That word "before" hung heavy between them, before the checkpoints, before the dust, before every street corner whispered danger. The radio crackled. "Team Bravo status check." Dr. Morrison's voice was steady, disciplined. He was the mission lead, a man Sarah respected for his calm under pressure. She pressed her transmitter. "Bravo 2, all good. Entering Sector 9 now." "Copy that," Morrison replied. Sarah glanced out the window. The streets were wrong. No children playing soccer. No vendors. Not even the stray dogs that usually prowled the alleys. Just the wind and the faint echo of something distant, something she couldn't quite name. Her instincts prickled. "Ahmed," she said quietly, "do you feel that?" He didn't answer at first. His eyes were darting between the windows, scanning rooftops, doorways, shadows. Finally, he said, "Yes, too quiet." The driver, Hassan, tightened his grip on the wheel. "Maybe they heard fighting nearby," he offered. "People hide when—" The first shot cut him off. A single crack, sharp, surgical, shattered the windshield of the lead vehicle. For a split second, everything froze. Then came the storm. Automatic fire erupted from both sides of the street. Bullets tore into metal, glass exploded, and Sarah's world turned into chaos. She ducked instinctively, heart hammering in her ears. The sound was deafening, metal screaming, men shouting, engines revving in panic. "Get down," Ahmed yelled, grabbing her arm and pulling her lower. Hassan tried to reverse, but another burst of gunfire slammed into the hood, spinning the vehicle sideways. Sarah could hear Dr. Morrison's voice over the radio, urgent, distorted. "Ambush, fall back, fall back." Static gunfire, then nothing. She could taste blood, metallic, hot, and realized she'd bitten her lip. The smell of cordite and burning fuel filled the air. She forced herself to breathe, to think. She wasn't trained for this, not like soldiers were, but she knew how to keep people alive. Hassan slumped forward, motionless. A crimson stain spread across his shirt. "Ahmed, he's hit," Sarah shouted. Ahmed tried to steer from the passenger side, ducking low. "Hold on," he cried. But before the words were out, another round struck the rear tire. The vehicle lurched violently, slamming into a wall. The impact threw Sarah against the door. Pain flared in her shoulder, a white-hot sting that made her gasp. She looked down. Blood. A bullet had torn through the upper part of her arm. For a moment the world narrowed to a tunnel. Gunfire, dust, heartbeat. She clamped her hand over the wound, pressing hard, trying to stop the bleeding. She thought of her father then, a Vietnam veteran who used to say that courage wasn't about the absence of fear, but about moving through it. She'd always believed him, but now she finally understood what he meant. Outside, voices shouted in Arabic. The shooting slowed, then stopped. Sarah's breathing came in short, shallow bursts. She didn't move, didn't dare. She could hear boots crunching on debris. The enemy was close, too close. Ahmed was still alive. Barely. His head rested against the shattered dashboard, blood trickling from a cut on his temple. She reached for him, whispering, "Don't move, don't say anything." The voices grew louder, 3, maybe 4 men. Their footsteps circled the convoy. A shadow fell across her window. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The door yanked open with a metallic shriek. A man in his 30s stared down at her, eyes hard and unblinking. He wore a mix of camouflage and civilian clothing, his rifle slung casually but ready. His beard was neatly trimmed, his hands steady. This wasn't random violence. This was planned. He barked something in Arabic. Another man answered from behind him. Sarah caught fragments. Alive, move, helicopters. She stayed limp, eyes half closed, pretending to be unconscious. Her fingers dug into the seat, trying to control the tremor in her hand. A slap sharp, blinding. "Wake up," the man growled, his accent thick but clear. Her eyes opened. He studied her, taking in the blood, the medical uniform, the Red Cross patch on her sleeve. Something flickered in his expression, curiosity, maybe recognition. "Doctor?" he asked. "Nurse," she whispered. He turned to his men, spoke quickly. They nodded. Strong hands pulled her from the vehicle. The movement sent a shock of pain through her shoulder and leg. She bit back a cry. Ahmed was dragged out beside her, half conscious. The street around them was a ruin, smoke rising, vehicles riddled with holes, the air thick with dust. Somewhere far off she thought she heard the thump of helicopter blades. But here, on this narrow street, time had stopped. Her captors pushed them forward. They moved quickly through alleyways that twisted like veins through the city. Each step was agony, the heat pressing down, the blood soaking through her uniform. She stumbled once, and a rifle butt jabbed her in the back. "Keep walking," the man ordered. They reached a small house, its front door hanging crookedly. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and sweat. The men spoke in hushed tones, checking their radios, packing nervously. Sarah collapsed onto a cracked tile floor. Ahmed sank beside her, whispering in English, "They will move us again, don't say anything, wait." She nodded weakly, her vision blurred. She thought of the patients she'd treated in the makeshift clinic just days before, a mother clutching her feverish child, a boy who'd lost his leg but not his smile. She wondered if they were safe. The pain pulsed with her heartbeat. Her training kept her mind anchored. Assess, control bleeding, stay conscious, stay alive. The man who'd slapped her earlier knelt down. His eyes were not cruel, only tired. He reached for her medical bag, rummaging through it. When he found the stethoscope and IV supplies, he smiled faintly, almost proudly, and said something to the others. "Doctor," one man muttered, "important." They were keeping her alive, but for what reason she didn't know. Hours passed in fragments, blurred voices, shifting light, the hum of radios. She caught pieces of conversation. Americans searching the city, helicopters circling overhead, orders to stay hidden. Her body trembled with fever. The bullet wound in her shoulder throbbed. The world around her faded in and out. That night she lay on the cold floor of a back room, staring at the cracked ceiling. Through a hole in the wall she could see stars, faint, pale, almost mocking. She thought of her mother's voice, gentle but firm. "You can't save everyone, Sarah." Maybe not, she thought, but that didn't mean you stopped trying. Pain surged again, sharper this time. She bit down on the corner of the blanket to keep from crying out. Ahmed, lying nearby, whispered, "They're arguing, some want to leave us, some not." She didn't ask what not meant, she already knew. She turned her head toward him, saw the exhaustion etched into his face. "We'll survive this," she murmured. He nodded slowly, eyes half closed. "You always say that." "Because it's true." Somewhere outside, the night cracked with distant explosions. The sound rolled through the city like thunder. Sarah closed her eyes, counting each detonation as if the rhythm could lull her into calm. But calm never came. Only the steady reminder that somewhere out there, someone might still be looking for them, or might have already given up. And yet deep inside the ache and the fear, something stronger lived, a refusal to surrender. Because even when the world falls apart, someone has to hold the line between mercy and madness. That night in a broken house in Fallujah, bleeding and half-conscious, Sarah Martinez decided that someone would be her. She woke to the sound of arguing. At first the words were muffled like voices underwater. Then they sharpened into anger, men shouting in Arabic, boots scuffing against the floor, the sound of fear pretending to be control. Sarah lay still. Her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. The bandage she'd made from her torn sleeve was soaked through, dark and sticky. She could smell her own blood. Through the thin walls she could make out fragments of the conversation. Ahmed's voice was somewhere nearby, pleading, reasoning. He was trying to translate, to calm them. She couldn't hear his words clearly, but the tone was desperate. Something about moving soon, something about the Americans. Then silence again, heavy, fragile, the kind that could break with a whisper. She sat up slowly, her vision tilting. The world spun once before settling. In the dim light seeping through a cracked window, she saw the small room they'd locked her in, a concrete floor, dust thick as ash, a mattress without sheets. Once a child's room, she could still see faded paint on the walls, cartoon animals smiling through bullet holes. How strange, she thought, to bleed in a place meant for laughter. Her hand brushed against something cold, a small toy car, metal, chipped blue paint. She turned it over in her palm. There was a name scratched on the bottom in Arabic, probably a boy who once dreamed of roads that didn't end in checkpoints. Her throat tightened. For a moment she forgot about the pain. She just stared at that tiny car and thought, what are we all doing to each other? The door creaked open. The bearded man, the one who'd hit her, stepped inside. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his movements betrayed unease. He held a cup of water and a small piece of flatbread. He placed them on the floor. "Drink," he said simply. Sarah's voice was hoarse. "I need to clean this." She gestured to her shoulder. He looked at the wound, then at her face. "No doctor here," he said. "You wait." She nodded, masking her fear with composure. "If I die, I'm no use to you." He hesitated, just long enough for her to know the thought landed. Then he turned and left without another word. Sarah stared at the water for a long time before drinking. Her hands shook as she lifted the cup. Each sip burned down her throat like fire, but she drank anyway. Outside, the sun climbed higher. She could hear helicopters again, faint, distant, like thunder over the horizon. Hope and dread twisted together in her stomach. Ahmed's voice came later through the wall. "Sarah, you awake?" "Yes," she whispered. "They say we move soon. Americans searching everywhere." Her heart raced. "Move where?" "I don't know." She pressed her hand against the wall as if the gesture could bridge the space between them. "We'll get out," she said softly. "You hear me? We'll get out." There was a pause, then a tired laugh. "You always believe in happy endings." "Not happy," she said, "just not over yet." Night fell like a shroud. The air in the room turned heavy, stale. She dozed, dreaming of her father's old stories, his voice low and steady, talking about the jungles of Vietnam, the friends who never made it home. "You don't come back the same," he used to say, "but you come back. That's what matters." When she woke again, it wasn't to gunfire or shouting, but to a new sound, something softer. Someone crying. She pushed herself up, wincing at the pain in her leg. Through a crack in the wall, she saw a figure sitting on the floor of the adjacent room. One of her captors, younger, barely 20. His rifle lay across his knees, untouched. His hands covered his face. He was whispering something, a prayer maybe, she couldn't tell, but the sound was raw. For the first time since the attack, Sarah saw something she hadn't expected in this place: vulnerability. He looked up suddenly, eyes meeting hers through the crack. Neither moved. The moment stretched: two strangers, two enemies, caught in the same war neither of them had truly chosen. He stood and walked away. A few minutes later, the bearded man returned. "Get up," he ordered. "We go." They blindfolded her. Ahmed too. Rough hands pushed them forward into the night. She felt the warm air shift as they moved, the smell of diesel, smoke, garbage fires. Somewhere nearby, gunfire echoed, quick bursts like a heartbeat. Her legs trembled with each step. The world became sound and pain and the suffocating cloth over her eyes. They stopped once, crouching as distant engines rumbled by. Her captor's grip tightened on her arm, keeping her low. The moment passed and they moved again. When they finally stopped, the blindfold came off. They stood in what looked like a half-collapsed apartment building, concrete walls cracked and blackened by fire. The windows were blown out, leaving jagged glass teeth along the frames. "Inside," the leader said. Sarah obeyed. Her shoulder was on fire now, the fever rising. Every breath came with a whisper of pain. Ahmed stumbled beside her, his face pale. "You okay?" she whispered. He gave a weak nod. "You still here?" The leader gestured to a corner of the room. "Sit, quiet." They obeyed. Time blurred again. Minutes became hours. The men took turns watching the windows, radios buzzing with static and urgent voices. From their tone, Sarah could tell the Americans were getting closer. Search patterns, building sweeps. One man kicked a chair in frustration. Another shouted into his radio. The leader barked back, trying to hold control of a situation slipping through his fingers. And then, unexpectedly, one of them, the youngest, the one she'd seen crying, approached her. He held out his arm. A deep cut ran from elbow to wrist, still bleeding. He said something in Arabic too fast for her to follow, then switched to broken English. "Fix this, you doctor." Her instincts overrode her fear. "I need my bag." The leader hesitated, then nodded. Sarah opened her kit with shaking hands. Alcohol, bandages, gauze. Her world narrowed to the wound in front of her. The training took over: clean, assess, wrap, calm the patient. "You'll be fine," she murmured as she worked. "Just hold still." The young man flinched as the antiseptic burned. "You are not afraid?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Of what?" He didn't answer. When she finished, she tied the bandage and looked at him. "Keep it clean. No dirt. Infection will kill you faster than a bullet." Something changed in the room after that. The air shifted slightly, but enough for her to feel it. The men looked at her differently now. Not as a trophy, not as a burden, but as something alive, something useful. That night, they gave her a little more water. And as she lay there in the dark, Sarah thought about the strange math of war, how saving one man's life might just save her own. The next morning came with more shouting. The radio crackled non-stop. American helicopters were circling the district now. She could hear them, low, constant, like giants breathing above the rooftops. Her captors were nervous, disorganized. Fear was contagious, and she could feel it spreading among them like fever. Ahmed leaned close. "They argue about us," he whispered. "Some say kill before they go." Sarah swallowed hard. "And the others?" "They think we value exchange." Her pulse quickened. "Which one wins?" He gave a faint smile. "That depends who shouts loudest." Hours passed. No food, little water. The sound of explosions grew nearer. The building trembled once, a dull boom that sent dust raining from the ceiling. Sarah looked at the doorway. No guards now, just shadows. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind refused to stop working. Every sound, every movement, she analyzed it, mapping the room, the corridors, possible exits. She knew her condition was worsening. The wound in her shoulder was inflamed, hot to the touch. Infection was setting in. She pressed her hand against it, trying to slow the trembling. "Stay awake," she whispered to herself. Stay human. Then something, a rhythm, not her heartbeat, not gunfire, boots, outside, approaching. The leader shouted an order. Men scrambled to windows. Sarah's pulse exploded in her ears. They're here, Ahmed breathed. She didn't know if that meant hope or death. The next minutes came like a dream, fast, disjointed. Gunfire, screams, the crash of something heavy upstairs, her captors shouting over each other, panic breaking their discipline. One man ran past the doorway, then fell. Sarah pressed herself to the floor, heart pounding. The sound of helicopters was deafening now. The battle was outside, but soon it would be inside. She thought of her patients again, the children, the mothers, the families who had trusted her. She thought of her father's words. You don't come back the same, but you come back. She didn't know if that was true anymore, but she wanted the chance to find out. As the noise of war closed in around her, Sarah whispered a single prayer, not for rescue, not for revenge. Just for one more sunrise. She couldn't tell if it was dawn or just the sky catching fire again. The building trembled with each distant blast. Fine dust drifted down from the ceiling, coating her skin, turning sweat into mud. She pressed her back against the wall, clutching her arm. The fever had taken hold now, her body shivering and burning all at once, trapped in that strange middle ground between waking and slipping away. Somewhere nearby, Ahmed murmured a prayer. His voice was hoarse, uneven. Still with me? She asked softly. He looked up, eyes bloodshot. I think so. She tried to smile. That's good enough. Her captors were arguing again. The young one, the one she'd treated, wanted to move them. The bearded leader wanted to finish it. No prisoners, he said in Arabic. She understood enough. Too dangerous, Americans close. The words cut through the fog of fever. She knew she was running out of time, not just from the infection, but from decisions being made in rooms she couldn't see. Her shoulder pulsed like a second heartbeat. The smell of rot was faint now, but unmistakable. She knew it, the sour scent of dying flesh. A nurse knows when her own body is failing. She closed her eyes. Her father's face appeared, lines deepened by war and years of silence. He used to tell her, pain is the body reminding you you're alive. Listen to it. She was listening now, and it was screaming. The bearded man stormed into the room, his rifle slung over his chest. Get up, he snapped. Sarah tried, but her leg buckled. Ahmed caught her arm, steadying her. Move. They were herded down a narrow corridor, past rooms littered with debris, torn curtains, shattered glass, the remains of lives once ordinary. A child's shoe, a woman's scarf, ghosts of people who had run out of time long before she arrived. Outside, the city was unrecognizable. The morning light revealed streets torn apart, burned-out cars, collapsed walls, and the thick black smoke of something still burning. 2 trucks waited by the curb. Sarah was pushed toward the back of one, her breath caught. This was it, the move Ahmed had warned her about, the one that could mean escape or execution. They shoved her inside. The floor was covered with empty ammunition boxes. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. Ahmed climbed in behind her. The young fighter, the one she'd bandaged, climbed in too. He sat across from her, avoiding her eyes. The engine started. The city rolled by in flashes through bullet-riddled panels, alleys, ruins, rooftops marked with gunfire scars. Somewhere above, a helicopter circled. Sarah's mind drifted in and out. Fever made everything surreal, the rumble of the truck merging with her heartbeat, the voices outside blending into a single, endless hum. She thought about the clinic, the laughter that used to echo through it when the power came back on after days of blackout, the children who used to draw pictures for her, crayon suns on scrap paper, smiling faces despite everything. She wondered if any of them were still alive. Her head slumped forward. Ahmed nudged her gently. Stay awake, he whispered. I'm trying. You must. They see weakness, they kill. She nodded weakly, forcing her eyes open. The world tilted and blurred. After what felt like hours, the truck stopped. The men jumped out first, shouting orders. The back doors swung open. Out, the leader barked. She blinked at the harsh light. They were in another part of the city, quieter, but no less broken. The building ahead looked like an apartment block that had been half-eaten by explosions. Its windows gaped like empty eyes. She stumbled inside under the weight of her wounds. Each step sent lightning through her body. The new room was smaller, darker. The air was thick with dust and decay. They left them there, Sarah and Ahmed, with a single guard at the door. When the footsteps faded, Ahmed exhaled. "We're running out of time." "I know," she said quietly. He looked at her shoulder, wincing. "You need medicine, antibiotic." She smiled faintly. "I could give you a list, but it won't help." "Maybe I talk to them. They need you, you doctor." "I'm not sure that's enough anymore." He fell silent. She leaned back against the wall. The fever burned through her thoughts, blurring them. But somewhere underneath the delirium, something still flickered, a thread of determination that refused to snap. Hours passed, the light changed, shadows crept across the floor. Then the door opened again. The young guard stepped in, the one she'd saved. His expression was uneasy. He carried a plastic bottle of water and a torn piece of bread. "For you," he said quietly. Sarah took the water with trembling hands. "Thank you." He hesitated, glancing toward the hallway as if afraid of being caught. Then he said, "Americans come closer. Many soldiers, tanks." Her pulse quickened. "When?" "Soon." He looked at her shoulder. "You sick?" She met his eyes. "You can stop that," she whispered. "Help me, help both of us." His jaw tightened. "If they find me with you, I die." "Maybe," she said softly. "But if they find us like this, we all die." The truth hung in the air, raw, undeniable. He stood there for a long moment. Then he stepped forward, setting down the bottle beside her. "Drink, stay quiet." He turned to leave. "Wait," she said. "What's your name?" He hesitated, then almost reluctantly, "Khalid." She nodded. "Khalid, you did the right thing helping me before. You can do it again." He didn't answer, but when he left, the door didn't lock behind him. That small sound, or lack of it, meant everything. Sarah waited, counting minutes, listening. The fever made time slippery, but she knew opportunity when she felt it. She turned to Ahmed. "We might have a chance." He looked at her, uncertain. "Chance for what?" "For something better than this." He nodded slowly. "I follow you." She tried to stand, but her leg gave out. Ahmed caught her again, steadying her. "Not yet," he said. "Rest first." "No time," she whispered. "They'll move again. We don't survive another one." A sharp sound outside, the thump of rotors. Close this time. Then the distant crack of gunfire. Her breath caught. The walls seemed to vibrate with life, as if the world itself was waking up. She moved toward the window, dragging herself with one arm. Through the broken glass, she saw shapes moving in the distance, soldiers maybe. Hard to tell through the dust and smoke. For the first time in days, she felt something like hope. Fragile, dangerous hope. Then the shouting started. Her captors ran through the hall, weapons raised. Khalid appeared again, face pale. "You stay here," he ordered. "No move." "What's happening?" she asked. "They find us," he said simply. "We fight." He ran before she could answer. Gunfire erupted outside, sharp, rhythmic. Sarah dropped to the floor, pulling Ahmed with her. Bullets tore through the walls, sending chips of plaster flying. The noise was relentless. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block it out, but even through the chaos she could hear the difference, the precision. This wasn't random gunfire anymore. It was trained, tactical. American. The thought hit her like a jolt of electricity. Ahmed looked at her, eyes wide. "You think?" She nodded. "It's them." Then we pray they know who we are. The minutes that followed felt endless. Screams, explosions, the smell of burning. Someone kicked in a door nearby. Then silence. Heavy boots pounded up the stairs. Voices, English now, fast, clipped, professional. Sarah wanted to shout, to move, to crawl toward them, but her body refused to obey. The door burst open. A man in full combat gear stood in the frame, rifle raised. For a split second, she froze, blinded by the flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Hands, let me see your hands." She raised them weakly, voice breaking. I'm American, nurse, medical relief." The soldier moved fast, lowering his weapon as another man entered, scanning the room. 2 hostages confirmed. Sarah's knees gave out. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. "You're safe now," the soldier said, voice calm but urgent. "We've got you." The words barely registered. The adrenaline, the fever, the relief, it was too much. Her vision blurred into white. She felt a needle prick her arm, a rush of cool fluid, and then the sound of a voice, distant, steady, professional. "Pulse weak, gunshot wound, possible sepsis." Then quieter, almost human. "Hang on, ma'am, you're going home." And just before the darkness took her again, Sarah Martinez thought of the toy car still tucked in her pocket, the one from the child's room. She carried it without realizing. In the middle of ruin, a reminder of something innocent, something worth saving. Then she let go. The world returned in fragments, sound before sight, pain before memory. A heartbeat not hers, someone else's, steady and mechanical, echoing through her skull. Then voices, not Arabic this time, short, clipped English. "Stabilize her, pulses weak." "Got it, BP 60 over 30 and dropping." Sarah's eyelids fluttered, heavy as stone. The world swam into view, flickering lights, shadows moving fast. A man leaned over her, face obscured by a helmet and visor. His gloved hands pressed against her shoulder, where fire still burned under the gauze. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He leaned closer. "Navy SEALs, you're safe now. Stay with me." "Stay with me." The words anchored her. She blinked, forcing the world to sharpen. The room around her was chaos, walls pocked with bullet holes, smoke drifting through the doorway. A second soldier crouched beside Ahmed, checking his pulse. Gunfire still echoed somewhere below, controlled bursts. Sarah tried to lift her head, but the soldier's hand pressed gently against her good shoulder. "Easy, we've got you." His voice was steady, but his eyes, what little she could see of them, were focused, alert, always scanning, always listening. Through the haze of pain, she realized the air was different now. It wasn't fear that filled the room anymore. It was command. Someone had taken control. She turned her head slightly, catching glimpses through the doorway, shadows moving in perfect rhythm, hand signals flashing, boots silent on the broken floor. Each step, each motion, part of a language she didn't speak but understood instinctively. Discipline, precision. And then, for the first time in days, she felt something close to safety. The soldier with the radio tapped his headset. "Eagle 2, this is Raven. Package confirmed, 2 hostages, 1 critical. Request immediate evac priority 1. A voice crackled back, distorted but calm. "Copy that, Raven. Extraction window open, 2 mics out." 2 minutes. Sarah's body shivered uncontrollably. The fever made her limbs feel like lead. She wanted to speak, to tell them about Ahmed, about Khalid, about the others, but her throat refused to form words. Another soldier appeared at the doorway. "Clear on this floor. We've got tangos down in the West Hall, perimeters holding." The first man, the one kneeling beside her, gave a short nod. "Move them now." Hands lifted her carefully, placing her onto a stretcher. The motion sent a flash of agony through her shoulder and leg, but she bit down hard, refusing to scream. "You're doing great," someone said. "Almost there." The hallway they moved through was a corridor of ruin, walls blackened by smoke, shards of glass underfoot. The smell of gunpowder and sweat filled the air. Every sound outside, every shout, every explosion felt distant, like echoes from another life. As they descended the stairs, she saw the flash of the American flag patch on the soldier's uniform. That small symbol, stitched on fabric, dirt-streaked, frayed at the edges, made her chest tighten. It wasn't about patriotism in that moment. It was about belonging, about knowing someone had come for her when she'd started to believe no one would. Outside, the air hit her like a wave, hot, smoky, alive with chaos. She heard helicopters close now, the deep thunder of rotors beating against the rising wind. "Go, go, go," someone shouted. Gunfire cracked in the distance, tracers cut across the dawn. Sarah's stretcher jolted as they ran. Boots thudded against the ground in perfect rhythm. Voices shouted positions, sectors, timings, a language of survival. She caught flashes as they moved: a burning vehicle, a fallen wall, a soldier crouched behind a barrier returning fire. The city around them looked like it was dissolving, each street corner bleeding smoke. Her eyes began to close again. The fever dragged her downward, but the soldier nearest her kept talking, grounding her with short, calm words. "Eyes open, ma'am. You've made it this far. Stay with me." She wanted to ask his name. She wanted to say thank you, but her voice wouldn't come. A new sound filled the air, the chop of rotor blades so loud it swallowed everything else. Dust swirled, sand whipping her face. The night turned orange as the helicopter's floodlights cut through smoke. Raven Eagle inbound, marking LZ. A flare hissed through the air and burst, painting the ground in red light. Sarah's stretcher lifted again. She caught a glimpse of Ahmed beside her, pale, barely conscious, his lips moving in what might have been prayer or delirium. "Hang in there, Ahmed," she whispered, though she wasn't sure he could hear. The soldiers formed a protective ring as they ran the final stretch. Bullets sparked off metal somewhere to the left. One soldier turned, fired a controlled burst, and kept moving. The helicopter loomed above them now, a black hawk, massive and magnificent, its rotors cutting the air into chaos. They reached it in seconds that felt like eternity. Strong hands pulled her up the ramp. The noise inside was deafening: the roar of engines, the metallic clang of gear. Medics swarmed around her instantly, cutting away blood-soaked fabric, attaching IV lines, checking vitals. A man leaned close, shouting over the noise. "Ma'am, I'm a corpsman. We've got you. You're gonna be fine." She tried to focus on his face, but her vision was fading at the edges again. The world pulsed between light and shadow. Then movement beside her, Ahmed alive, breathing. That was enough. The helicopter lifted, tilting slightly as it gained altitude. Through the open hatch she saw Fallujah spread below, a city of smoke and broken stone, glowing faintly in the dawn. Somewhere down there were the people she'd come to help, and the ones who tried to kill her. The war had blurred all lines, turning compassion into a kind of rebellion. The medic's voice broke through her thoughts. "She's septic. Get fluids in now." Hands worked quickly. Tubes, bandages, needles, the familiar rhythm of medicine, but this time she was the patient. Her mind floated somewhere between consciousness and dream. She remembered the toy car again, still in her pocket. The blue paint chipped, the wheels stiff. She thought of the child who once owned it. Maybe he was gone, maybe not. But if she survived, she'd make sure someone remembered him. Someone remembered all of them. The corpsman's voice was softer now, closer. "You're safe, ma'am. We're taking you home." Home, she thought. The word felt foreign. She turned her head weakly toward the soldier sitting nearest the door, his rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the horizon even now. The same soldier who'd found her. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. No words, just a nod, acknowledgement between two people who understood what survival cost. Then darkness claimed her again. When she woke next, it was to a different kind of light, clean, white, steady. The beeping of monitors replaced the roar of engines. The smell of antiseptic replaced smoke. She was alive. For a long moment she just listened. Machines, voices, the gentle rhythm of footsteps. She tried to move her fingers, they responded. Her shoulder ached, her leg was heavy, but she was alive. A nurse noticed her eyes open and smiled. "Welcome back." Sarah blinked slowly. "Where?" "U.S. Military Field Hospital," the nurse said. "You've been out for a day and a half." A shadow appeared in the doorway, broad shoulders, uniform dusty but clean now. The soldier who had found her. He stepped closer, removing his helmet. "Ma'am," he said with a respectful nod. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, how are you feeling?" Her voice was weak but steady, like I got run over by the war. He smiled faintly. "That's about right." Silence lingered for a moment. Not awkward, just heavy with everything that didn't need words. "You saved my life," she said quietly. He shook his head. "You saved your own, we just gave you a ride." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, the fear, the hope, the small kindnesses from unexpected places, but all she could say was, "Thank you." He nodded once. "Rest now, you're safe. We'll debrief when you're stronger." As he turned to leave, she called softly, "Sergeant." He looked back. Were there others, survivors from my team? His expression shifted. "A few, we're still confirming, you'll be briefed soon." She nodded, the truth could wait. When he was gone, she stared up at the ceiling, sterile, perfect, silent. The contrast to the chaos she'd lived through was almost unbearable. Tears came without warning, quiet ones, the kind that hurt more than the wounds. A nurse adjusted her IV, speaking gently. "You're safe now, try to rest." Safe. It was a strange word, because safety didn't erase what she'd seen, what she'd done, what she'd survived. It only gave her the space to remember it. She closed her eyes, and in the dark behind her eyelids she saw the faces again. Ahmed's weary smile, Khalid's conflicted eyes, the bearded man's fury, the toy car, the city burning under the sunrise. And she realized something. Survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. Because safety doesn't come without ghosts. They told her the fever finally broke on the fourth night. Sarah didn't remember the fever. Only fragments, flashes of light, voices calling her name, cool hands pressing against her forehead. A helicopter's rumble echoing somewhere far away, blending with her dreams. When she woke for real, the world was still white, clean, orderly, the opposite of everything she had come from. A hospital tent wide, humming with generators and soft beeps. Rows of wounded soldiers separated by white curtains. The smell of disinfectant hung heavy in the air. She lay still for a long time, afraid that if she moved it would all collapse, the illusion of safety, the fragile quiet. A nurse appeared beside her bed, older, calm, her uniform crisp even in the desert heat. "Morning, sweetheart," she said with a soft southern accent. "Welcome back to the living." Sarah's throat was dry. "How long?" 3 days since the rescue," the nurse replied. "You had a nasty infection, but you're stable now. Lucky woman." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Lucky," she echoed. The word felt strange, like something borrowed from another life. The nurse adjusted her IV line, then leaned closer. "You're a tough one. Most wouldn't have made it." Sarah turned her head slightly. "Ahmed." The nurse's face softened. "He's here, next tent over. He's awake too. You'll see him soon." Relief flooded through her chest, fragile but real. After the nurse left, Sarah stared at the ceiling. The light above flickered once, and for a second she saw muzzle flashes instead, the memory invading uninvited. Her heartbeat quickened. She closed her eyes, willing the image away. But that's the thing about trauma, it doesn't knock before entering. It just walks in, sits down, and stays. Hours later, a shadow appeared at the edge of her bed. Permission to come in. She looked up. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stood there, cleaner now but still carrying the quiet weight of war in his stance. Sarah nodded. You don't need permission. He smiled faintly and stepped closer. How are you holding up? She shrugged, careful, mindful of the bandages. I've been better. He chuckled softly. Fair enough. For a moment, they just sat in silence, the hum of the machines filling the space between them. Then Sarah asked, how bad was it, the building? Rodriguez exhaled slowly. Bad. They had you surrounded, wired in. We almost didn't go that night. Intel said it was too risky. But Command gave the green light when one of our sources said there were hostages inside. Turned out to be you too. You found us because of Khalid, she said suddenly, realizing it. Rodriguez frowned slightly. Khalid. One of them, my captor. He wasn't like the others. He let me live when he didn't have to. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He was there when we breached. He surrendered. He's being held for intel debrief. Sarah nodded slowly, unsure how to feel. He saved me in his own way. Rodriguez studied her face for a moment. That's a complicated kind of mercy, ma'am. It usually is. He hesitated, then said, if you ever want the full after-action report, I can get it for you. But maybe not yet. Not yet, she agreed. When he left, she felt the silence rush back in. That night, the dreams began. She was back in the convoy, the sound of glass breaking, Hassan's scream, the smell of blood and diesel. In the dream, she reached for Ahmed, but he kept drifting away, swallowed by smoke. Every time she turned, someone else was dying. And when she finally found her voice, no one could hear her. She woke gasping, sweat drenching the sheets, her hands shaking. The nurse rushed in. Hey, you're safe, honey, you're safe. But the word safe felt meaningless, because the mind doesn't understand geography. It doesn't care if you've crossed a border. It carries the war with you. Days passed. She began physical therapy, each session a reminder of what her body had lost: strength, mobility, innocence. The bullet wounds healed slower than she wanted. The infection left her weak, her hands trembling when she tried to hold utensils. Still, she forced herself to move, to walk, to stand. Because lying still too long made the memories louder. When she was finally strong enough, they wheeled her to another section of the facility. Ahmed was waiting, propped up in bed, his arm in a sling and his ribs wrapped tight. He smiled weakly when he saw her. You look terrible, he teased. You too, she shot back, but her voice trembled with relief. They laughed, a small broken laugh that felt like oxygen. Ahmed's eyes softened. They tell me your infection almost killed you. And you almost got yourself shot trying to save me, she countered. He shrugged. It was a good trade. They fell silent. Then softly he said, do you ever think about them, the ones who didn't make it? Sarah nodded. Every hour. He stared at the wall. Me too. It was strange. Survival felt heavier than death, because surviving meant remembering. Later that evening, she was visited by Colonel Rebecca Thompson, the chief surgeon overseeing her case. A woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed but kind, the kind of presence that filled a room without needing to raise her voice. She flipped through Sarah's chart. Your vitals are good, you're healing, but recovery's not just the body, you know. I know, Sarah said. Thompson studied her. You've seen a lot, more than most civilians ever should. I'm not sure I'm a civilian anymore, Sarah murmured. The colonel smiled faintly. Maybe not, but you're alive, and that means you get to decide what that means now. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling again, tracing the small cracks in the canvas above her bed. She thought about her family, her mother's voice, her father's old war stories, her little brother who used to tease her for watching the news too closely. They didn't know yet, at least she didn't think they did. Somewhere out there her name was probably on a list, rescued aid worker, a headline, a symbol. But she wasn't a symbol. She was a woman who'd been shot 3 times, bled on the streets of Fallujah, and somehow still cared about the people who'd done it. And that confused her more than anything. Compassion is easy in a classroom. It's harder when you've seen what human beings can do to each other. The next morning, Rodriguez returned. This time, he carried 2 cups of coffee, black, strong, the real kind. He handed her one. "Got clearance for visitors," he said. "You've got one." She raised an eyebrow. "A visitor out here?" He smiled slightly. "Someone high up wants to thank you for not dying." She laughed despite herself. "That's a strange reason to visit." A few minutes later, a small group entered the tent: journalists, officials, cameras clicking softly. They asked questions about her ordeal, her recovery, her courage. She answered carefully, her words calm, deliberate. But every question felt like a needle probing wounds that hadn't healed. When they left, Rodriguez leaned against the wall. "You handled that well." "Feels strange," she said. "Everyone wants a story, they want meaning." He nodded slowly. "That's what people do when they don't know how to face pain. They turn it into a lesson." Sarah looked down at her bandaged hands. Maybe pain doesn't need to be a lesson. Maybe it just needs to be felt. Rodriguez watched her for a moment, then said softly, "Maybe that's the lesson." That night she stood for the first time without help and walked to the flap of the tent. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the camp lights, black and infinite. The stars shimmered faintly above, untouched by war. She thought of the child's toy car again, still tucked beneath her pillow. She took it out, turned it over in her palm. The metal was warm from her hand. It had survived with her, a small piece of innocence that refused to die. She whispered to the empty night, "You made it too." Behind her the base was quiet, the hum of generators, the soft murmur of voices, the far-off sound of helicopters. And in that stillness she realized something. Survival wasn't about being spared. It was about being changed and choosing what that change meant. For the first time since Fallujah, she let herself breathe without fear. It wasn't peace. Not yet, but it was something close. A beginning. It felt strange to see color again. Not the pale white of hospital lights or the dull beige of sand, but real color. Blue sky, green lawns, the faded red of her mother's front porch. Sarah stood in the doorway, a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and waited for her parents to notice she was home. Her father was the first. He moved slowly, the way soldiers do when time itself feels fragile. His hair had gone grayer since she'd last seen him, but the sharpness in his eyes was the same. He didn't say anything at first, just walked up to her and pulled her into his arms. For a moment she forgot to breathe. Then came her mother, rushing out of the kitchen, her hands still damp from dishwater. The sound she made wasn't quite a word, more like a release. All the fear, all the nights waiting by the phone, pouring out in one broken exhale. They held her between them, 3 people trying to fill the space that war had carved open. When they finally let go, her mother cupped her face in both hands. "You're too thin," she said, voice trembling. "They didn't feed you over there." Sarah smiled faintly, "Not much." Her father's hand rested gently on her shoulder, the good one. "You're home now, that's all that matters." But Sarah knew that wasn't true. Home wasn't a place you stepped into. It was something you had to find again, piece by fragile piece. The house hadn't changed, the same photos on the wall, the same ticking clock in the hallway. Yet everything felt foreign, like stepping into a museum of someone else's life. Her old bedroom was waiting neat, untouched. Her mother had kept it exactly the same. Books on the shelf, posters on the wall, the kind of details that made it feel like she'd never left. But the woman standing in that room wasn't the same one who'd packed those books away 2 years ago. The next few days blurred together. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles. Old friends called. Reporters left messages, wanting interviews. The TV replayed her rescue footage more times than she could count, her stretcher being carried through smoke, her face pale and bloodied, the American flag stitched on a rescuer's arm. People called her brave. But bravery, she thought, wasn't what had kept her alive. It was luck, and maybe something deeper, a refusal to let go of the small things that made her human. At night, she couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Every creak in the floorboards made her tense. Every flash of light from a passing car felt like gunfire. Her body healed faster than her mind, and her dreams became battlefields she couldn't escape. One night she woke to the sound of rain, soft, steady. For a moment, she thought it was gunfire again. Her heart pounded until she realized the truth. She sat up in bed, breathing hard, pressing her palms to her chest. Her father appeared in the doorway. He didn't turn on the light. He just stood there, silhouetted, calm. "Rain's good," he said quietly. "Means the air still trying to clean itself." She nodded, her throat tight. "I keep hearing it, Dad, the shooting, the voices." He stepped into the room and sat at the edge of her bed. "It never really stops," he said softly. "You just learn to live beside it." "Does it ever go away?" He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had held rifles decades ago in a different jungle. "Not completely, but one day it won't scare you anymore. It'll just remind you that you survived." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. For the first time since coming home, she let herself cry. Quietly, not from fear, but from the relief of being understood. Days turned into weeks. Her body regained strength. She started walking again, around the block, then through the park, then farther. People recognized her sometimes. They stop, smile, say how proud they were, how her courage inspired the nation. She'd thank them politely, but inside, she didn't know what to do with those words. Inspiration felt like a costume she didn't fit into. One afternoon, she visited a veteran support center. It wasn't for her, not officially, she wasn't a soldier. But she walked in anyway. A group sat in a circle, coffee cups in hand, trading stories in quiet tones. One of them, a Marine with a prosthetic leg, noticed her lingering near the door. "You lost too?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. "Not like you." He smiled gently. "Loss comes in different uniforms." She took a seat. They talked about nightmares, about noise, about the way silence could sometimes be worse. No one judged. No one tried to fix anything. It was the first time she didn't feel like a headline. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the Arizona desert, she sat on her parents' porch with a cup of tea. The wind was warm, carrying the faint smell of dust and sage. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Sarah Martinez." The voice was familiar, calm, professional. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said, smiling faintly. "I was wondering when you'd call." He laughed softly. "I figured you might need a break from uniforms before hearing from one again." "Appreciated," she said. "How's your team?" "We're good. Mission complete, everyone home. Command wanted me to tell you your case report went all the way up. They called it one of the cleanest hostage recoveries in the region." Sarah shook her head. "Clean isn't the word I'd use." He paused. "No, it never is." There was a quiet moment. Then he said, "Listen, we're passing through D.C. next month for a briefing. If you're ready, maybe you could share your experience with the folks planning future civilian missions. The kind of thing that could save lives." Sarah hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it." "Then just talk to them," he said. "Doesn't have to be perfect, just honest." Honest, she could do that. When the call ended, she sat for a long time, watching the horizon fade into night. The world was quiet again, but not empty. She reached into her pocket and took out the toy car, her small reminder of a child she'd never met. The chipped paint glinted faintly under the porch light. She placed it on the railing, balancing it carefully. For 3 days in Fallujah, that car had been her anchor, proof that innocence could survive even in ruins. Now it was her reminder that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering without breaking. Weeks later, she stood before a congressional panel in Washington, her hand steady as she adjusted the microphone. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. But she didn't think about them. She thought about Ahmed, about Hassan, about the people who never got to tell their story. "I'm not a hero," she began quietly. "I'm a nurse who got caught between worlds, one that destroys and one that heals. But if you want to protect humanitarian workers, if you want to save lives, then understand this: compassion is not weakness. It's strategy. It's survival." Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't need to. When she finished, the room was silent. Not the kind of silence that follows a speech, but the kind that holds respect, the kind that lingers. Afterward, Rodriguez caught her eye from across the hall. He gave a small nod, not congratulations, but acknowledgement. On the flight home, Sarah watched the clouds drift beneath her. The world looked peaceful from above, no borders, no smoke, no sides. She thought of the line her father had told her years ago: pain doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. He was right. And as the plane cut through the sky, she realized that maybe healing wasn't about escaping the storm. It was about learning to carry the rain with grace. The first time she stood in front of a classroom again, her hands shook. It wasn't from fear of speaking. It was the strange weight of being listened to, of realizing her story now belonged to other people as much as it did to her. The room was filled with young medical volunteers, bright-eyed and idealistic, some barely 20. They looked at her like she was a symbol, a warning and an inspiration all at once. She didn't feel like either. Sarah adjusted the microphone. "Before you go into a conflict zone," she began softly, "everyone tells you how to stay safe. What they don't tell you is how to stay human." The room went still. She took a slow breath. "You'll see things you can't unsee. You'll want to help everyone and you won't be able to. That's the hardest truth to carry." Her voice faltered for just a moment, but she steadied it. "The day I was captured, I wasn't thinking about politics or danger. I was thinking about a boy with a fever and a mother who hadn't slept in 3 nights. That's why I stayed in the convoy that day. I thought compassion could outrun violence." A pause. "Turns out it can't, but it can survive it." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with understanding, the kind that only comes from realizing the world isn't black and white. After the session, one of the students, a young woman with cropped hair and steady eyes, approached her. "You make it sound survivable," she said quietly. Sarah smiled faintly. "It is, but not the same kind of survival they teach you in first aid. It's a different kind. You learn how to breathe through fear, how to see people as people, even when the world tells you not to." The girl nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "I hope I can be like that." "You already are," Sarah said gently. "You wouldn't be here otherwise." That night she walked through the quiet campus of the training center, a converted military base turned humanitarian facility. It was peaceful here. Desert winds brushed against the flagpoles. The stars looked almost the same as they had in Iraq. For a moment she closed her eyes and let herself feel both worlds, the chaos and the calm. She stopped trying to separate them long ago. They were both part of her now. Later that week, she received a letter from Ahmed. He'd written from his new home in Virginia. His English had improved, his sentences still careful but full of warmth. "My children started school today. They ask about you. I told them you are the reason I am still here. I hope one day they meet you, so they can see what courage looks like." Sarah smiled as she read it, then she read it again, slowly. It wasn't courage she saw in herself. It was persistence, the stubborn refusal to give up when everything inside wanted to. She wrote back that same night. "Tell them I'm proud of their father. Tell them courage is what happens when kindness refuses to die." Weeks later, she met with Staff Sergeant Rodriguez again. This time, not in a hospital or war zone, but in a cafe near the Pentagon. He was out of uniform, but still carried himself like a man who could hear danger before it spoke. "You clean up well," she said with a small grin. He chuckled. "You too. Looks like you've been busy." I started teaching, running training sessions for new volunteers, trying to make sense of what happened. "That's what warriors do," he said simply. "Turn chaos into lessons." She tilted her head. "I'm not a warrior." He gave a small shrug. "You sure about that?" They both smiled, but his eyes softened. "You ever think about going back?" She looked out the window. The city lights blurred through the glass. "Not to Fallujah, but maybe somewhere else. Somewhere that needs hands more than headlines." He nodded. "If you ever do, you won't be alone this time. We've been coordinating with aid teams, joint protocols, escort programs. Your story actually helped build that bridge." She turned to him, surprised. "Mine?" "Yeah, the report from your capture went into our training curriculum. How you handled yourself, your composure, your decisions, it's part of what we teach now. You made a difference." For a moment, she couldn't speak. It was strange, being remembered not for surviving, but for helping others learn how to survive. She looked down at her coffee. "I just did what I could." Rodriguez smiled faintly. "That's all any of us ever do." When he left, he saluted her, not formally, but with quiet respect, the kind that doesn't need ceremony. Months passed. Sarah began giving talks across the country, to universities, to medical boards, to military academies. She didn't tell the story for fame. She told it so others could understand that resilience wasn't about strength. It was about meaning. In one speech, she said, "People always ask me if I regret going to Iraq. I don't, because if compassion only exists where it's safe, it isn't compassion. It's comfort." Applause always followed, but she never stayed for the standing ovations. She'd smile politely, step off stage, and walk somewhere quiet. Because applause wasn't peace. She still had her bad days, days when the smell of diesel made her flinch, when a helicopter flying overhead turned her stomach cold, when a sudden noise brought Fallujah crashing back into her mind. But the difference now was that she didn't hide from it. She faced it. She joined a trauma recovery group, soldiers, aid workers, refugees. Different uniforms, same ghosts. They met every Thursday in a small room behind a church, where coffee was always too strong and the chairs never matched. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat in silence. One evening, a veteran named Miles told her, "You talk like you've forgiven them." Sarah thought for a long moment before answering. "Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about not letting hate own what's left of me." He nodded slowly. "That's heavy." "It's lighter than anger," she said. After each meeting, she'd walk home under the city lights and think about that word, forgiveness. It wasn't neat or easy. It was jagged, fragile, but it was hers. In spring, she visited the rebuilt medical clinic in Fallujah, not in person, but through a live video call arranged by the New Aid Coalition. On screen, she saw local doctors treating children, young nurses moving through clean hallways that used to be rubble. "Can you see this?" the director asked, turning the camera. "This place exists because of what you started." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she whispered, "Tell them I said thank you for not giving up." That night back home, she sat at her desk and opened a new document on her laptop. At the top she typed, "The Fallujah Journal, Lessons from a Nurse in War." Not a memoir, not a story about suffering, a guide, raw, practical, honest, for every doctor, medic, and volunteer who would one day walk into danger believing healing could still matter. As she wrote, she kept the toy car beside her keyboard. The blue paint was faded now, one wheel missing, but it still rolled crookedly, stubbornly. Sometimes she'd push it forward with her finger and watch it travel a few inches before tipping over. It always made her smile. Because that's what survival looked like, not perfect, not heroic, just moving forward even when you're a little broken. Weeks later, her foundation launched officially, a collaboration between former soldiers, medical professionals, and trauma psychologists. Its mission: to train humanitarian workers for conflict zones and ensure no one went in unprepared again. Reporters called it the Martinez Initiative. Sarah preferred its unofficial name, the line between mercy and madness. Because that's what the work really was, holding that fragile line where compassion met chaos and refusing to let go. At the opening ceremony, Ahmed stood beside her, smiling proudly. His children waved small flags. Rodriguez was there too, in a plain suit, quietly watching from the back. As Sarah gave her speech, she looked at the audience: soldiers, nurses, translators, people who'd seen too much and still showed up anyway. Her voice was calm, steady, filled with the kind of truth that didn't need to shout. We all carry our own wars. Some are fought with weapons. Some are fought with kindness. And some are fought in silence, every day, just to stay human. But survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of responsibility. Because once you know the cost of life, you don't waste it. The applause was quiet this time, gentle, respectful. And for the first time since Fallujah, Sarah didn't walk away from it. She stood there, tears blurring the faces in front of her, the weight of everything: loss, pain, purpose, settling into something that finally felt like peace. Not the peace of forgetting, the peace of becoming whole again. The desert looked different in winter. Sarah had forgotten how soft it could be. The way morning light turned the sand gold, the way wind erased footprints overnight, as if the earth itself was learning how to forgive. She stood at the edge of the camp, boots sinking slightly into the dust, a thin scarf wrapped around her shoulders. The convoy behind her was loading supplies: medical crates, water filters, blankets. It was Iraq, not this time. It was Jordan, a refugee settlement just beyond the border. Different map, same mission. Rodriguez was there too, overseeing logistics with a handful of his old team. He moved with quiet precision, still carrying that soldier's calm, the kind that made chaos seem temporary. "Ready?" he asked, tightening the strap on his vest. Sarah smiled faintly. "As I'll ever be." He grinned. "That's what you said last time." "Yeah," she said softly, "and I survived that one." They shared a brief look, not of fear but of mutual understanding. Some bonds didn't need words. The camp was alive with motion: children chasing each other between tents, aid workers checking lists, translators calling out in Arabic and English. The air smelled of dust and diesel, but beneath it all was something else. Hope, maybe, the fragile kind. As she walked through the rows of tents, people recognized her. Some from photos, some from stories. She didn't like being called a hero anymore, but she'd learned not to correct them. People needed heroes to believe healing was possible. At one tent, she stopped to check on a young mother holding an infant. The baby was coughing softly, his tiny chest rising and falling with effort. Sarah knelt beside them, gentle hands moving with practiced ease. "How long has he been sick?" "2 days," the translator said. She listened to the child's breathing, then smiled. "He'll be okay. He just needs warmth and medicine. We can handle that." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She reached for Sarah's hand, whispering something Sarah didn't understand, but she didn't need a translation. Gratitude has a universal language. Later, as the sun began to fall, Sarah stood watching the horizon. The desert stretched endless and silent, the same silence she'd once feared, now strangely comforting. Rodriguez walked up beside her, holding 2 tin cups of tea. He handed her one. "To the calm before the next storm," he said. She smiled. "There's always a next one, isn't there?" "There always is." They stood in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Then he said, You ever think about how far you've come? Sarah laughed softly. Sometimes, but mostly I think about the ones who didn't. He nodded slowly. That's what keeps people like us grounded. She looked at him. You still have nightmares. He took a sip of tea. Sometimes you. Sometimes. They both smiled, small and knowing. The kind of smile that comes when you stop trying to outrun your ghosts and just learn to walk beside them. That night in her tent, Sarah sat by the dim glow of a lantern, writing again. Her journal was filled with ink-stained pages, notes, reflections, half-finished thoughts. On the top of a new page she wrote, Day 467 since Fallujah. Peace is not the absence of memory, it's the decision to live anyway. She stared at the sentence for a long time, then underlined it once. Outside, the camp quieted. A few voices murmured softly in the distance. Somewhere, a generator hummed. And then laughter, a child's laughter, light and clear and alive. She closed her eyes and smiled. The sound pulled her back to that small moment in Fallujah, the toy car, the broken street, the child she never saw again. She could still feel its shape in her hand, the chipped blue paint, the dented wheel. She carried it across borders, through airports, hospitals, and briefings. It had become her anchor, proof that something pure could survive the darkest places. She reached for it now, turning it over in her palm. It caught the lantern light, gleaming faintly. She whispered, still rolling. A soft knock at the flap pulled her from her thoughts. Ahmed stepped inside, smiling. He looked stronger now, older, the lines on his face telling their own story. You still don't sleep, he teased gently. She smiled, old habits. He glanced at the toy car in her hand and nodded toward it. You kept it. Of course. He sat beside her, looking at the journal. You write every night. Not every night, just when the silence gets too loud. He nodded thoughtfully. My son still talks about you. He says when he grows up he wants to help people too, but maybe without the bullets. She laughed softly. That's the dream. Ahmed's gaze lingered on her for a moment. Do you ever wish it had gone differently? She looked down. All the time, but wishing doesn't change what's done. I used to think survival was about staying alive. Now I think it's about staying true. He smiled. You have a good heart, Sarah. I have a stubborn one, she corrected gently. He chuckled, same thing. When he left, she blew out the lantern and lay back on her cot. The desert wind pressed against the canvas walls, whispering faintly like distant voices carried by time. She closed her eyes and let the memories drift in, not as intruders this time, but as old companions. She saw the convoy, the explosion, the nights of terror. And then, slowly, the hands that reached for her, the faces that stayed, the people who refused to let her die. It all blended into one quiet truth. Survival wasn't luck. It was love disguised as endurance. In the morning, she woke to light spilling through the tent. She stepped outside barefoot, feeling the cold sand under her feet. The camp was already stirring. Breakfast fires, soft chatter, the rhythmic sound of distant prayers. She watched a group of children playing near a truck, their laughter cutting through the dawn air. One of them was pushing a small toy car through the dirt, its paint chipped, its wheels uneven. Her breath caught. The boy looked up, noticed her watching, and smiled. He held the toy up proudly, as if to show her that it still worked. She smiled back, tears blurring her vision. It always does, she whispered. The day unfolded slowly, checklists, briefings, heat. But inside she carried that image of the child, the small symbol of persistence. Later, before they broke camp, Rodriguez called her over. We're headed out in 20, he said. She nodded, adjusting her pack. Got it. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, You know, for years I thought survival was about strength, about who could endure more. But you taught me something different. She raised an eyebrow. What's that? He smiled. That survival is about compassion. You outlast the darkness by refusing to become it. She didn't answer right away. Then she said quietly, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." He nodded, "Yeah, and sometimes it saves lives." They walked together toward the convoy. Engines started. The desert wind lifted small spirals of sand around their boots. As they climbed into the lead vehicle, Sarah glanced back one last time. The camp stretched behind her, tents, people, dust, all of it temporary, all of it alive. And somewhere among it all, a child's laughter still echoed, bright and untamed. The world would keep breaking. It always did. But maybe healing wasn't about fixing it entirely. Maybe it was about showing up again and again with open hands. The convoy rolled forward. The horizon shimmered with heat, endless and golden. Sarah leaned her head against the window, watching it all blur together, the past, the present, the endless road ahead. Her voice, soft and steady, might have been lost to the wind, but if someone had been listening closely, they would have heard her whisper. We survived not because we were strong, but because we remembered how to care. And as the desert stretched endlessly before her, she smiled, not as a hero, not as a survivor, but as a witness to something far more enduring than war. Humanity.